Hello and welcome to another episode of Pick 3 DST, where I give you 3 defenses I like and 1 defense I'm fading for Week 6 of the NFL season. Before we get to our rankings, we do have to start with our accountability check from Week 5, which is pretty humbling after a rough week. We did have the Lions as our stud defense, and they scored 7 points, which is fine, but they did not get into the top 10. We had 2 garbage time touchdowns from the Panthers, but those things do count against us. The solid defense was the Cowboys. I argued that the safety of the Cowboys defense meant that they were worth keeping in your lineup. That obviously did not work out for us. They got a big fat 0. And while I do think a lot of that had to do with Dak Prescott and the offense turning the ball over, again, those are things that factor in here. That did not work for us. Our sleeper defense of the Texans got us 4 points, which is solid, but again, didn't get into the top 10. And then lastly, we faded the Bengals defense against a Cardinals offense that was playing pretty well and conservative. I do think that the James Conner injury early in the second quarter really impacted the way that the Cardinals were playing offense and helped the Bengals defense. But again, them's the breaks, as they say. The Bengals defense performed, and it was a poor fade. So hopefully we'll turn things around in week number 6. And as a reminder, please pause this video, comment below, and let me know which defense you are starting in Week 6, and ask me any start-sit questions, and I'll answer those as the week goes on. We'll start, as always, with my sleeper defense of the week, which is the Atlanta Falcons. Consensus has them at 17th, and I have them up at 11th this week. So it's not a play I love, and that should tell you a lot about ranking defenses in Week 6. Part of the reason we have the Falcons this high is their matchup against the Commanders offense that gives up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing defenses. The Commanders are 29th in turnover rate and 31st in sack rate allowed. So it is an offense that we want to attack, especially since Sam Howell has a tendency to play some hero ball and turn the ball over and cause some opportunities for defenses. However, this is a Falcons defense that's fine, but not great. They're 7th in yards allowed per play, they're 11th in pressure rate, and they're 15th in opponent scoring rate. So they're outside the top 10. They're kind of a top 12 to 15 defense in a matchup that we like, which I think pushes them to a fringe top 10 unit, but they're not a must roster unit this week. My solid defense of the week is the Miami Dolphins. Consensus has them at 6th, and I have them up at 5th this week. They're coming off a game in which they sacked Daniel Jones 7 times and allowed under 270 yards of total offense. So you certainly like that going up against a Panthers offense that has allowed 15 sacks and 8 turnovers through 5 games so far in the NFL season. We also like the fact that the Dolphins are 10th in pressure rate and 2nd in the NFL in knockdowns, which is sacks plus quarterback hits. So they are getting pressure on the quarterback against an offense that does give up sacks and turnovers, and so I think that's going to be a huge impact for the Dolphins this week. I expect them to get into the backfield and get those sacks, but also put pressure on Bryce Young, which should cause turnovers, which we saw from the Panthers last week. Now, the Panthers are 10th in the NFL in scoring rate, and like we saw with our Lions pick last week, they could put up some points, especially in garbage time if they're trying to keep up with this Dolphins offense. So I don't think this is a smash spot, but I think the Dolphins should sneak into the top 10 here. As a reminder, these are not my full weekly DST rankings. If you want to get those, you can click the link below, and I'll be updating that article as the week goes on. Now, my stud defense of the week is the Buffalo Bills. Consensus has them 2nd, and I have them 2nd. But before we get to why I like the Bills this week, I do want to use them as an example of why I think we should not be looking at rest of season value for defenses this early in the year. Every single week when I post my rankings, I get questions about what do I think of a particular defense rest of season, or how do I rank a set of defenses rest of season. And I really think we want to avoid that line of thinking right now. When we look at what happened with the Bills last week, on the first drive of the game, they lost both Matt Milano and Daquan Jones probably for the season. Both of those guys were playing at Pro Bowl levels through 4 games, and the Bills the week before lost Trey White for the season, and he is also a Pro Bowler. So in just 3 quarters of action, the Bills defense drastically changes, and what they're able to do on the field drastically changes. And that's why I think we really want to avoid our rest of season expectations this early in the year. I know it's tempting to have a, quote, set it and forget it defense, but it's week 6 and a lot of things are going to change. I'd much rather be looking at the defense landscape 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And that's why I still like the Bills, despite all of the injuries, because they're facing a Giants team that gives up the most points to opposing fantasy defenses and has allowed 30 sacks this year. And this is a Bills defense that's 1st in the NFL in knockdowns, second in the NFL in pressure rate, and fourth in the NFL in turnover rate. So even though I think they're a little banged up, they really do have a solid defensive line. They're going to get more snaps for Von Miller. So I expect them to take advantage of a Giants offensive line that's really beat up and maybe without Daniel Jones. And even if Saquon Barkley comes back, I don't think that's going to really help mitigate the Bills' pressure rate advantage. And so I think the Bills are still a really solid play for this week. Now we'll end with the defense I'm fading for this week, and it's the Minnesota Vikings. Consensus has them at 13th, and I have them at 22nd. So this should tell you again, there's a lot of consensus in the rankings of the top defenses this week. However, I know the Vikings are going to be enticing to some people because they have a good matchup against the Bears, and a lot of fantasy sites are projecting them for a pretty solid total. However, we really don't want to play bad defenses even when they're in good matchups. And I think that this matchup is going to be enticing because the Bears are going to be without Khalil Herbert, but I do think that Roschon Johnson and Donta Foreman are going to be able to carry the load on the ground, and Justin Fields has really turned up his play in the last couple of weeks as the Bears are giving him more designed runs and allowing him to play a little bit more freely. This is a Vikings defense that's 31st in pressure rate, 29th in turnover rate, and 20th in opponent's scoring rate. So it's really not a good defense, and I expect the Bears to be able to deliver and at least keep the Vikings out of the top 10. So you might be looking at a finish, for deep leagues only. So don't go too heavy on the Vikings. And that's it for week number 6. As a reminder, click below to like and subscribe to get all of our football and fantasy football content at NBC Sports. Click the link below to see my rankings for week number 6, and we'll see you next week on another episode of Pick 3 DST. Good luck on Sunday.